Good evening, I'm Emma Jane Vere and this is Television Tonga News. In the headlines, His Majesty King Dubo VI to address the UN General Assembly. A book based on Tonga in the 1950s launched in New Zealand. And the editor and publisher of Galea newspaper to pay a penalty or fine for contempt of court. These and more stories, including news from the Pacific, sports, world and the weather forecast later on in this bulletin. Let's take a look at the news in detail. Their Majesties King Dubo VI and Queen Anaspao arrived in New York in the United States on Monday this week. They were greeted by the Prime Minister, Lord Ivano, and Tonga's Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Mahe Uliuli Duponiua Jr. Here's Fatai Whaingaa with that report.
The statement from the Prime Minister's office says Their Majesties attended a reception hosted by the US President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama for heads of states and their spouses at the Waldorf Astoria. King Dubo VI attended a luncheon hosted by the UN Secretary General, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, for heads of delegation to the 68th session of the UN General Assembly. The Queen and Anaspao also attended a luncheon hosted by the US First Lady Michelle Obama for spouses of heads of state. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister was invited to address a high-level event on sustainable energy for the least developed countries or LDCs, co-hosted by the Presidents of the Republic of Benin and the Prime Minister of Norway in collaboration with the United Nations Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries and Small Island Developing States. At the event, Lord Ivano addressed LDC member states to declare the Pacific Regional Data Repository Agreement a seeds effort to support the United Nations Initiative for Sustainable Energy for All. The Lord Prime Minister and Lady Ivano will attend other social events to be hosted by the United Nations Secretary General and Mrs. Ban Zoon Taik and other heads of delegations. The Prime Minister as head of government also attends the high-level meetings of the 68th session of the General Assembly from September 23rd until the 28th, as well as to hold bilateral meetings with heads of delegations, including leaders and heads of governments from the Pacific Forum Islands. His Majesty the King, as head of delegation, will address the United Nations General Assembly this Friday, September 27th, as Speaker number 3 in the morning session. Their Majesties King Dubo VI and Her Majesty Queen Anaspao are expected to leave for London on Saturday. For Television Tonga News, I'm Fatai Whaingaa.
A new book titled 100 Fathoms Square has been launched in New Zealand. The book talks about Tonga in the 1950s. The director for Pacific Island Studies of Massey University in Auckland, Professor Malakai Koloamatangi, told Television Tonga News that it was launched by Her Royal Highness Princess Iuliktapu Kalaniuvalu Fotofili in Auckland. Sini Latu has the details.
Professor Malakai Koloamatangi says the authors of 100 Fathoms Square are New Zealand surveyors Bruce Alexander and Larry Wordsworth. The authors were in Tonga on a request from Her late Majesty, Queen Salote Dubo III, to help divide tax allotments. He says that there are several pictures in the book of Tonga in the 1950s. I know that Princess Siuiliktapu was moved to see a picture of her late father, who was Prime Minister at the time. The book was prioritized by the late King George Dubo V and his family, as they're also very significant to them and the country as well. At that time, Her late Majesty Queen Salote Dubo III was the leader of Tonga. Professor Koloamatangi says the book is of great significance to the kingdom. The book is very important. The Tongan word, Dao e Taha, originated from when the two surveyors divided tax allotments and is known in the English language as 100 Fathoms Square. The content of the book is important to Tonga socially, economically, technically, and constitutionally. When the two men were in the Tonga in 1957, they took photos of Tonga and wrote of events that occurred in the 1950s. There are also pictures of villages in the outer islands of Ha'apai, Vava'u, Ewa, and the two Niuas. The director for Pacific Islands Studies of Massey University says the authors also played a very important role in Tonga's history as they helped in the amendment of the Land Act, giving 16-year-old boys an opportunity to register land. Professor Kolamatangi adds that the book is based on diaries and letters wrote to their families while they lived in Tonga. The authors are now in their 80s, in which they last visited Tonga in 2008. Professor Malakai Kolamatangi hopes that the book will be available for sale in Tonga later this year. For Television Tonga News, I'm Sinila Do.
From the Supreme Court today, the Chief Justice Michael Scott has ruled for the editor and the publisher of the Galea newspaper to pay a fine of 2,500 pa'anga each for contempt of court. Madeni and Laudala Tapueluelu have been ordered to pay this to the Supreme Court. The ruling was based on a submission of contempt of court by the Attorney General regarding the editor and publisher of Galea newspaper. The Attorney General's submission referred to an opinion column published in the Galea newspaper over the decision-making of the magistrate or police magistrate in a civil case which included an individual, Solomon Pule, and 7 government ministers. While the court was adjourned before a ruling was made, another submission was made by the Attorney General to consider an apology made by Galea's editor and publisher to the court. This apology was published in their newspaper, dated September 9th. However, the Chief Justice Michael Scott ruled that the editor and publisher must pay the fine within 2 months or face 2 months imprisonment. A survey held in Tonga has revealed a large number of young people are suffering from diabetes, even at the young age of 11. That's according to the president of the Tonga Medical Association, Dr. Paula Vivili, to Television Tonga News on the 4th day of the Regional Conference of Doctors, which is held at Whaonelua Convention Centre. Anasiu Falekauno was there and filed this report.
Youth and non-communicable diseases is one of the main topics discussed at the annual meeting of medical doctors from the region. This further emphasizes the importance of this year's theme, Youth of Today, Our Future Tomorrow. The survey was carried out by the University of the South Pacific's Tonga campus for the Ministry of Health. In a presentation by the USP's Director for Tonga campus, Dr. Ana Koloto, she says although diabetes cannot be cured, it can be treated. In her report, 89% of causes of diabetes is due to overconsumption of food high in sugar and fat, 7% from being overweight or obese, 18% is caused from someone who has diabetes, and 13% is from stress or worry over diabetes and getting it as a result. Dr. Koloto's report also revealed when diabetes is not controlled, up to 79% result in amputation of limbs, 63% causes blindness, 54% results in kidney problems, and also stroke and heart disease. The president of the Tonga Medical Association, Dr. Paula Vivili, says that there are other diseases youth are vulnerable to due to change in the times and easy access to everything. I've noticed in the past young people would hardly suffer on non-communicable diseases, but nowadays they are getting it, with the youngest person getting diabetes at the young age of 11 instead of getting it when they're much older. Other diseases seen in young people are also from sexually transmitted diseases. This shows that the times are changing, and so are the ways and attitudes of youth. It's important for the hospitals to help and guide our youth in these matters. Meanwhile, Dr. Vivili stressed the importance of closer cooperation among the government leaders, churches, communities and stakeholders in order to help and guide the youth as they are tomorrow's future. Anasiu Falekauno for Television Tonga News.
From Parliament today, the Legislative Assembly this morning approved the report on the parliamentary visit to Ha'apai constituency number 13. Members of the House discussed issues raised by the Ha'apai Nobles representative number 2, Lotu Iha'ateho, who led the visit to the Ha'apai constituency. The issues raised in the report include transportation challenges, equal share of Parliament's annual fund for constituencies, and the need for a representative from their constituency in the House. The report revealed that the parliamentarian for Ha'apai constituency number 13 had been sick or on sick leave for a long period of time, and the people from his constituency are calling for their voices to be heard in Parliament through their own representative. Television Tonga News understands that this is the first time for the issue of having no representative from their constituency in Parliament included in a parliamentary report. Meanwhile, members of the House passed the report of the parliamentary visit to Ha'apai constituency number 13 after much discussion on the issues yesterday and today. New Millennium Export has started packing its squash produce for its foreign market. The harvest and packing season for squash also provides temporary employment for many people. Fononga Veikoso reports.
Workers of the New Millennium Export Company are preparing the squash which will be shipped to its foreign market. This begins with the careful selection, washing and packing of squash produce. The manager, Leslie Namoa, says they buy squash from local farmers and employ workers to prepare and pack it in boxes. We hired more than 300 workers to prepare the squash for export. The ship arrives October 7th. The squash produce this year is much better than last year's. This is New Millennium Export's first shipment of squash to its Japanese market. Fononga Veikoso for Television Tonga News.
Tonga's official foreign reserves for August rose by 3.5 million pa'anga from July's position, reaching about 253 million pa'anga. This amount can cover imports of 8.5 months. It exceeded the amount recorded last August. The highest monthly increase so far this year was recorded in April at 13.6 million pa'anga. That's after recording the highest decline in the official foreign reserves by 13.3 million pa'anga in the previous month of March. That's the local news. Pacific